Hello, and welcome to the Power of Private Conversations. So, I'm going to talk about two things that really matter to me in the mediation practice and conflict management practices that I do. But first, we're going to stall for a moment while everybody comes in and starts to get into this feed. So, it's just going to take a few moments for Walter to find the feed and for CD. So CD and I were originally going to do these two together, the one that was Sunday night and this one. And you know what? You can only do a joint share right now if you are in the United States as an inviter. And so we couldn't do that. So instead, you get to see me, and CD will be in the comments. So you can say hi to CD in the comments, and then you can go back after this one and watch his really great presentation that he did on Sunday. You can find those both on the Mediate BC website or Facebook page and on the Overthinking Conflict Facebook page. So I'm just going to say hi to people joining. It's great to see you guys. Thanks for coming out. So first, I'm going to say that this is one of the Mediate BC virtual summit for Conflict Resolution Week talks. And they want me just to say a few things to kind of give you guys some context. So this is an initiative that we're trying this year just to see if we can do some education around conflict resolution happening in the province. Conflict Resolution Week is November 3rd to 10th, and there's lots of great events happening all around BC. Hi, Walter. Hi, CD. Hi, Mom. Hi, Donna. And Anna and everybody else who's joining. It's great to see you all. For those of you who don't know, Mediate BC is a not-for-profit that does education, promotes and facilitates mediation and other collaborative processes all over BC. You can check out the Eventbrite page for other talks that are going on all week. And they would really like me to add that anything I say is my opinions only and not their opinions at all, which is probably safe because every once in a while I am slightly controversial. So today's topic is how privacy and having private conversations can really change how we handle conflict and the role that confidentiality can have in that space as well. And we know this from feedback. So when we say, when we want to give feedback to somebody and we kind of pull them aside and we say, hey, you know what? This is the thing that happened and this is what's going on, and we do it privately, they're way more likely to be able to hear us. If it's embarrassing, if maybe they were uncomfortable with what had happened, they're much more likely to be able to hear you. You can go up to somebody and say, you know, I don't think that comment that you just made was appropriate. If you do that quietly afterwards, they're more likely to be able to hear you. And we know that from all kinds of different research around defensiveness and feedback. And where that actually starts to really matter in conflict is when we have two people that are speaking, when they can pull that conversation into a private space. Both of them are much less likely to have to do a bunch of the sort of pro-social behaviors that all humans do that get us into trouble. So they don't have to do face saving for the group they represent. They don't have to think about how what they're saying might be perceived by other people listening. And they can hear what you are saying as the other person in that conversation. This is even more significant when we look at confidentiality. So in a lot of the work I do, I'm working with businesses who have a lot to risk if the fact that they have conflicts becomes public. So if you need shareholders to like you, to know what you're up to think that they can trust you, it becomes really dangerous for those shareholders sometimes, for your company's funding future, to think that things aren't working, to be worried about conflict. And so in that space, the ability to have a private conversation with somebody to facilitate it, where they can trust that it's confidential, that it's private, that no one's going to find out, allows them to have a real conversation. And these kinds of conversations matter. Now, because that's so important, I can't actually share stories from the work I do, from some of the businesses that I work with, but I can share some of the things that I kind of hear as overall themes. So every once in a while, I will have a funder or maybe a tech startup group just pre-funding that will come and talk to me. And they don't want anyone to know that we are having this conversation. And the reason that it's so important to them is that about 10 years ago, Noam Wasserman, who has done a lot of research around funding and around startups and who succeeds and who doesn't, put out a study that says that 50% of all startups that are in business today will have failed. Half of them will have failed because of co-founder conflict. And that conflict is very real. That conflict is very dangerous for the future of that business. And since people know this, the concept of conflict spooks funders. So a lot of businesses are better off looking like they're doing really well than risking admitting that there's something wrong. And that something that's wrong will get them into trouble in the future if they don't have those conversations earlier on. So I'm curious, there is a bit of a delay in the video. So if you have questions, please ask them now so that I can start to get to them, because probably Facebook is showing you about things that are about 30 seconds in my past. So this piece where privacy and confidentiality sit together is one of the things that makes mediation really powerful. So anything that happens in a mediation with me can't go to court. It can't legally be shared on Facebook. It can't be placed in any of these places that are risky for people. So if you have a dispute with your neighbor and your neighbor is a politician and you want to resolve it, court is going to be very scary for them. Probably they will be very, very defensive. Chances are that will be a very volatile, quite awful process. A mediation would be private, would be confidential, and may get you a solution that works for both of you where you maintain the relationship. And that can be very, very powerful in creating better communities. When we look at groups where there's multiple stakeholders, where you have people that are representing a group, they may not be able to bargain, to discuss openly, to brainstorm things that might at first glance, their group might not like. And so in this space where perhaps we're trying to solve, and I can think of a few things locally, an Enbridge pipeline dispute, union bargaining often sits in this space where if this is a public conversation, everybody at the table is thinking about how all of their constituents are watching them and what that bargaining looks like, instead of being able to have a really open discussion and then at the end say, okay, how do I take this back to my constituents in a way that they're going to be okay with what we've come to? And so you can maintain the interests of the people you represent, but that conversation you can be less guarded in, and you can get a lot better work done. It lowers the fear and the risk. And by lowering the fear and the risk of having the conversation, we increase the chances that people can actually have deep and real and meaningful conversations and actually get somewhere. So at this point, I'd like to say, does anybody have any questions? Because I like questions, or scenarios they're thinking about, or ideas that when I say privacy matters and confidentiality matters, that come up for them. Because sometimes people go, oh, wait a second. What happens if? What happens if the stuff that comes up is really terrible for one of the parties? Or what happens if there's power imbalances? Or what happens if? And I mean, part of the value of having a really good third party there is to handle some of that stuff. to maintain that voluntary space, right? If you don't have to enter into a space, you can back out of it in a way that is still okay. The ability to enter into a conversation and then leave a conversation and still maintain face in your community can be really important for people. Reputation can be really important for people. Maybe you can have a conversation about how what you did in that instance wasn't okay without risking your job. If you can have that conversation for the first time, one-on-one, privately or facilitated, and then potentially make a more public statement once you've even worked out what it actually is or what happened, or once you've done a lot of the thinking out loud that often happens in these situations. So it's about what I've got to say. I'm just peeking for questions and I'm not seeing any, which either means they're coming in slow or I answered them all, and I doubt I answered them. So if after you've heard this little chat, something starts to niggle around in your head, just throw it in the comments and I'll answer it later, or come find me on Twitter. I'm at Mindful Conres, and I spend more time there answering questions and interacting with people. So that's a great place to find me. You can check out CD's talk about, and now I don't even remember what it was called exactly, but it was about preparing for difficult conversations and tools for preparing for difficult conversations. And that was on Sunday, and it's on the Overthinking Conflict page. And you can also, if this is interesting to you and talking about conflict resolution stuff is interesting to you, you can check out our podcast at Overthinking Conflict. And if, I don't know, if this stuff really gets you going, you can check out some of the other live streams that are being done by other mediators around the province that are coming up. I believe there's 6 or 7 more as part of Mediate BC's virtual summit. A couple that I'm looking forward to are My Teenagers is Driving Me Crazy by Lori Frank, and that will be tomorrow at 7. We'll be doing a conflict resolution writers group one on Friday at noon. And I believe Friday, let's see, I think Walter is going to be doing one on Friday as well. And there's a couple more on Saturday. Sharon's going to do one on Can Fiction Make You a Better Conflict Resolver? And that'll be at noon. I'm sure there's a few others that I missed. Hello, Al from Fort St. James. I think you are the furthest away person joining us. Welcome. So just to kind of recap quickly, I believe very strongly in the power of private conversations and confidentiality to make these conflicts solvable. And if you have any questions, throw them in the comments and we'll answer them later. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.